Hello again, everyone. This is Kent Smith. I am here to talk to you about the Wildfinder from the World Wildlife Fund. Now, this isn't an app that produces products like some of the other, technology that we've been talking about. This is actually a reference site, but I do think that it is an excellent example of how we can integrate technology and making things more interactive and useful. So I think it's more engaging for the students. I think it's a good way for them to visualize information that may otherwise be very abstract to them in any other context, in text. So they can actually physically see things. They can make some relationships between the information that they see in print and what they see on the screen. So I intend to use this for my students to use this as a resource when they're doing research, and I would also like to have them incorporate it into screencast recordings, because as you can zoom in on the maps and some other features that it has that we'll go over here in a second. So I think it might be pretty useful and creative if I can get somebody to figure out how to integrate something from this site into their presentations live. So let's go ahead and go in here. So this is the main website that we go into. I am primarily interested in the map because that's the interactive piece. When you log on to the website, when you first get there, it's going to give you, a species will pop up and it kind of rotates through. You can do a search straight from this search tab right here, enter a species or location, an ecoregion, anything like that, and then it'll take you to it and give you some general information. But what I want to show you is the map. So this is the map. And it's really cool. It's colorful. It moves. And there are a lot of different pieces to this that really make it an interesting tool and a good visualization for the students. So what I want to talk about, let's talk about base maps first. So the base maps are the maps that are underneath everything else, and those options. So we have a topo map, the topographic map, and actually to show you, we're going to zoom in to North America, to United States, so we can get a little bit better. You can see how it actually has the states broken down, and you can see everything. If you notice, I'm zooming in towards Wyoming, and I'm looking for Yellowstone National Park, because that has something to do with the project that I did with TAC and the American bison, and that's what I want to do some research on. So I wanted to look through here and show you some of those different features as it pertains to an actual project. So this right here, the base map, we're looking at the topographic. If we look at the street map, it is basically the same. It just outlines all of the major roads, and as you get down closer and we zoom in a little bit more, you'll be able to see some more detailed roads down in there. We can also use the relief map, which is not colored. It doesn't have the dense vegetation for forests and things like that. It is just based on elevation. But again, these do not have contour lines and things that you're used to seeing on a map, so it's a little bit different. You also have the satellite image, which is cool because I can give them a good idea of how dense the vegetation is and what it's going to look like on the ground. Now, if we go back, and what I like to use is the topo, because it gives me a good understanding when I'm working with the students. It will give them an opportunity to see exactly where that location is. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in here and I'm going to search for the American bison, because that's what we were talking about in the other project, and that's what I want to search for. So I just type in American bison, you hit search, and it'll give me a couple of different options here. So I want American bison under the species. I could also look at some locations that are associated with bison, but it's not an ecoregion, it's just a specific location. So if I wanted to look at bison in Kansas, it would populate, but what I'm looking for is I'm looking for the bison, the American bison, the species information. So once I click on that, what it's going to do is give me some basic information. It'll give me the scientific name from the class on down. It doesn't give me the species, but it does when I go back into, and I'll show you another screen where it does have the species information on it. It shows us what their conservation level is, which is good. And then if we go from here, so what it also tells us is it tells us the ecoregion, and that's important. I'll come back to that. What I want to talk about is this is the More Information tab. Right here, on all of these species, you can actually go to either the Encyclopedia of Life or the IUCN list, which is the red list. So if I come here, I click on that link, it's going to give me all of this information, right, which is on the red list. And this gives us conservation data, it gives us population data. So this is really the reference and gives us a lot of information. And it's right there, and it's linked to this information that we were looking at, and that they can actually visualize where these individuals, where these species, the region that they populate. So if I want to, now I can just minimize this and I can see the region, right? But I can't really see what's under it. So I can't see how that relates to everything else and where Yellowstone really is. So if I set my transparency and bring my transparency up to here to probably about 85%, somewhere around in there. And then as I zoom in, I can get right to Yellowstone National Park, which is what I was looking for, right? So if I double click on this area, on this region, it will give me, when I click on it, it'll bring up the region, and I can select that ecoregion and it will bring it up. And so this gives us the information on, it is the South Central Rockies Forest area. It's a temperate coniferous forest. And it gives us, what's really interesting here is it gives us a list of all of the species, 317 species that live in that particular area. So they can, if the student wanted to do, obviously we're talking about bison, we can get that information. We can get some photos, double click on it and it'll take us back to that American bison that we were talking about. And we can come right back to that ecoregion. All right, and then we can choose, if we wanted to see what else was there, they can look at what other species are in that same area. So, it's really interesting. Somebody can go in there, you can find your local area, and then you can search. And, if I just bring up one of these, if I look, so the American beaver is clearly least concern, so it's not really in danger. But if I wanted to go through and find something that was in a more protected status, I could just keep going through until I find something that's in a protected status if I was looking for, perhaps a subject for a report. So that's how I can find some information. What I'd like to show you as well is how I would think that I could use this in a multimedia type of a situation, making a screencast video. So what we can do here is, make sure that we're centered. It's really cool. You get centered on Yellowstone National Park. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and zoom out right here. And then if I bring my transparency down a little bit, you can see that region. And if I wanted to start a video, I could show where that location is, and I could highlight it here for you. And then I could talk about, as I'm talking, I can make that a little bit more faint, and I can start zooming in, and I can keep getting closer and closer, and I can talk about how the bison are in that particular ecoregion and where that ecoregion is in the United States. And then I can talk about how, Wyoming is one of the states in that particular area, and that Yellowstone National Park happens to be the national park. And then we can link it, and I can, talk about Yellowstone National Park and the bison that are in that particular area. So that's how I would use it to kind of integrate into it. But of course, there are obviously a multitude of possibilities there. So something else that I thought was really interesting for students and can really bring some concepts home, especially when you start talking about biodiversity and ecology, is under the, let me get rid of the transparency, when we talk about the ecoregion. All right, so some of these other themes that we can get into. What I'd like to talk to you about, let's talk about richness. So richness is the species richness that talks about how many species are located in a particular region, right? Like the biodiversity is really what it's looking at. So the darker the area, the more diversity, the more species are in that area. It's really interesting for students to be able to see that these areas with the most biodiversity are really in those tropical regions, right? And as you move north and south away from the equator, then you tend to get less and less biodiversity. So that's really important. Then we go to, and we can switch to endemism. So we talk about endemic species. Endemic species are species that are only located in a specific region or a geographic location. So again, when we talk about those darker areas, we're talking about an area that has more unique organisms in it. So, and again, it's in that tropical region. So it really gives the students something to look at and say, wow, that is really a diverse area there, that tropical region where we have the rainforests and, some of these conservation efforts, they're really in this area that we should be focusing on. So it can give them a greater understanding of, some of those concepts that may otherwise seem pretty abstract to them. So those are some of the basics. That's what I would intend to use this particular website with my students, and having them working on those projects, and particularly when we start talking about species and those that are on the endangered species list or critical areas and in need of conservation as they're working through those projects. So with that being said, I believe that this tool meets the ISTE student standard of S7D, which states that students explore local and global issues and use collaborative technologies to work with others to investigate solutions. So clearly when we talk about endangered and critical species, we're talking about global issues and working with others, World Wildlife Fund or the IUCN Red List. Those individuals, really working on a global in global nature and empowering the students to do things like that. So along with that, for educators, I believe it meets the ISTE standard E5B, which is design authentic learning activities that align with content area standards and use digital tools and resources to maximize active deep learning. So again, I think that this is definitely authentic learning because we're talking about real world problems and how they affect populations of organisms, and how our actions obviously impact that as well if we're working through those types of scenarios. So that's why I chose the Wildfinder from the WWF, and thanks for listening.